Today on Voice of the Valleys, tragedy strikes a Jewish community in Manchester as the struggle of the Syrian enacts that struggle against their community, taking the lives of many before having his own life ended in the process. Not only that, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to look at the media response. We're also going to look at more disgusting things from the Vale of Glamorgan council meeting we covered on the previous episode. And finally, the lunatics and retards that make up the Green Party, who we also need to keep an eye on. All that and more today on Voice of the Valleys. Why, hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Voice of the Valleys yet again. Your host, friendly neighbourhood, far-right, dark, always satirical. Again, it is a joke, ladies and gentlemen. There's a joke. Mr. George Castle, hope we're all doing well. Hope we're all having a fantastic morning, afternoon, evening, night, wherever we are. First off, get the number of things that we need to out of the way. If you haven't already, please consider supporting me in some ways that you may be able to. It's just a simple one-time donation to buy me a coffee, or get access, ladies and gentlemen, to exclusive content in either Patreon, Locals, or YouTube memberships. My breakdown of The Last Girl by Nadia Murad, the Yazidi genocide survivor and Sabia escapee, it's a story you really need to read, and there will be little bits of it coming out, being made public on YouTube over the coming weeks, right? A little bit here and there, but you really want to go listen to it in its entirety. As I said, it's a video that a lot of work went into. More than that, I'd love for people to see it, obviously. But anyway, getting straight into the topics of today. Thank you to everybody that's tuning into the show. Thank you for everybody that leaves their comments, likes, shares it, etc. Sharing is one of the biggest things that you can do, ladies and gentlemen, helping me not only get my voice out there, but that's how we're going to obviously have more of an impact, is by people spreading the word, essentially. And even if it's just sparking more conversation, sparking debate, whatever it is, that is better than us being silent, compliant, and ignorant more than anything, and not allowing ideas to clash. Speaking of clashes, ladies and gentlemen, what has basically been a manifestation of the Israel-Gaza conflict made its ugly face seen, if you will, the ugly face of evil seen on the streets of Manchester recently in a synagogue in on the maps, the ONS maps, I struggle to find when people are sharing screenshots where exactly it is, but apparently the synagogue itself is in either Crumpsall or on Middleton Road, I believe it is. There's a terror attack that recently took place. So for those of you who have not seen it, ladies and gentlemen, a person now been identified, he's now dead, by the name of Jihad al-Shami, or Jihad al-Shami. Yes, his name is literally Jihad, ladies and gentlemen, who was 35 years old, went into a synagogue and I believe shot up and stabbed a bunch of people. Several people were killed in that. He was also killed, and I believe by some reports, some of the Jewish attendants at the synagogue that were there when this terror attack took place were also sadly killed by police. So it's a travesty all around, obviously. You never want to see things like this. You never want to see attacks against innocent people and all of this stuff. What is been the biggest thing, though, ladies and gentlemen, is the media reporting and kind of how we're seeing, as a result of mass immigration, as a result particularly of mass Muslim immigration, all of these things from the Middle East and so on. The interesting thing is we're basically seeing a manifestation of the Israel-Gaza conflict, or Israel-Palestine conflict, if you want to call it that, on UK soil. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, the British citizen of Syrian descent is what he's been described as, the terrorist. His name literally translates to struggle of the Syrian. Do with that information what you will. But just to give you some context, ladies and gentlemen, here was the address, some of the address that Keir Starmer gave to the nation in the wake of this terror attack. Video coming on screen now.
Good evening. Earlier today, on Yom Kippur, the holiest day for the Jewish community, a vile individual committed a terrorist attack that attacked Jews because they are Jews, and attacked Britain because of our values. So many Jewish families first came to this country as a place of refuge, fleeing the greatest evil ever inflicted on a people. And Britain welcomed them. Communities like the one attacked in Manchester provided safety, but also the security that comes from a promise that this is a country that stands up to hatred, and that we don't just provide refuge, we provide a home. For so many Jewish families, that is the story of Britain. But Britain is also a country where Jewish buildings, synagogues, even schools require round-the-clock protection, where dedicated specialist security is necessary because of the daily threat of anti-Semitic hatred.
I wonder why, and I wonder where it's coming from. And I wonder why maybe it's coming from that one specific area, ladies and gentlemen. I wonder if there's more at play here. So as I was telling you, this area of the country is very notable indeed. So I'm going to bring this up on screen for you now. Again, this is from the 2021 census. What you're going to see is this area of Manchester. I'm going to zoom it out before I bring it on screen. So you can see here on screen now, ladies and gentlemen, that there is indeed a heavy concentration of Jewish population in this area, about 56.7%, right? But what you'll notice, if I just tap on over and flick over to this, you notice a shift there, ladies and gentlemen. In this area in particular, which I believe, based on what some people have said and where I could find it, is the area where the synagogue was attacked. Obviously, you'd expect it to be where the highest percentage of Jews are, right? You'll see that there's a heavy concentration of Muslims in the areas surrounding it. 16.8% in Sedgley Park, 69% on average in Crumps Hall South, 42.5% in Strangeways, 41.5% in Cheetham Hill. Sorry, not Cheetham Hill. Cheetham Hill even. So around these areas, ladies and gentlemen, it gets to a little bit late then when you get to Prestwich Central and Kersaldale and so on. We'll flick back here. Outside of Sedgley Park, we do indeed have another high Jewish population element. The Jews are relatively low in the other areas. You're basically seeing a, smaller city-sized version, or even not even a whole city, like a part of a city, that's very reminiscent of what's going on in the Middle East. It just goes to show that these conflicts, these issues, transcend geography. And that's something we should, always keep in mind when people try to push, diversity and all of this stuff, right? And multiculturalism and all of this stuff. So these things, these conflicts, these disputes, first they come for the Saturday people, then they come for the Sunday people. Funnily enough, Keir Starmer echoed similar sentiment in a rare moment of seemingly speaking up for Christians and speaking up for the threat that it poses to the native British people. We'll get onto that in a moment. I'm not saying that, native British people all have to be Christian by any means, but, Christian, at least at one point, was the predominant faith in the land, right? After it sort of broke it away from the grip of paganism and so on. But these conflicts, why we should be very wary of mass migration and immigration really anywhere at all, especially from these areas of the world, because these conflicts, they transcend geography. It doesn't matter where they are. When you have, it's like oil and water. They never mix. These groups in some ways don't mix. Israel, you could say, is kind of notable in that regard for all of the things people say about the government. Bibi Netanyahu in particular, the far right in Israel and all of these things, right? The Likud party, etc. For all the things that people say about these things. It's notable that Israel's one of the places, I think particularly because it is a Jewish majority state, that you tend to have a relatively large population of Arabs and therefore Muslims, for the most part, living side by side in relative harmony. You even see Arab Muslims and Jews alongside each other in the IDF, right? Praying alongside each other before they go into battle. So this is obviously tragic. I believe several people lost their lives, and obviously I mentioned that there was some that were shot by police afterwards as well. Very, very sad indeed. No words to describe how sad it is. Also notable, ladies and gentlemen, before I play this next video, is that the SAS were called in the aftermath of this operation, which has really gotten a lot of people riled up, myself included, because many people, and it's sad that this has now resulted in a lot more anti-Semitic or anti-Jewish sentiment that may have otherwise been generated, not because I'm saying that the SAS shouldn't have been called in or whatever. Think about how many issues have been perpetrated, how much, the rape of Britain, Southport, Lee Rigby, Manchester Arena, 7/7, all of these other things, right, where the forces could have and should have potentially, could have and possibly should have been called in, right? I'm not the person to obviously make that determination. But again, it sparked a lot of anti-Semitic sentiment or anti-Jewish sentiment when we've seen, hang on, we're calling in our special forces because of an attack on a Jewish community, but we couldn't do it for our own young girls when they were in these rape dens and stuff like that. It's kind of sad, but I think there's maybe more at play here. I think that's an admittance that maybe there's more at play here, and there's things that especially people in Manchester or particularly the most diverse areas should be ready for. And I got a feeling this is far more of a problem than our governments are letting on. I believe there's far more problem than our governments have been letting on. And even in Wales, where it does seem as though we don't have the same problems as these areas do with regards to these ethnic and religious conflicts, we need to be wary potentially of any sleeper cells and anything like that. I think we could potentially have a mass, activation of these things in all our countries. And it's going to be particularly in the more diverse areas where you'll notice the initial damages, the initial atrocities because of that. But yeah, the fact that they had to call the SAS in to raid the home of the terrorist, truly stark indeed. But this is one rare moment, as I said, ladies and gentlemen, when the establishment speaks, more often than not, when they're trying to speak for the British people or speak up in favour of the British people or for Christians or whatever. I believe he actually spoke about what's going on in Nigeria at the moment, which is nothing short of a genocide as well, of Christians at the hands of Islamic terror groups. But he said here in this video now, once they've dealt with the Jews, the next target is the Christians. And he's talking about the Nigerian genocide. And it's kind of thing now, Keir Starmer, the Labour government, and the Conservatives as well, have spent generations lecturing us on racism and Islamophobia and all of these things. But here is now the Prime Minister of the UK, the ultimate champion of diversity and leftism and pride and so on, now saying, here's this one group of people, seemingly, that once they've dealt with the Jews, they're going to come for the Christians next. First they come for the Saturday people, and then they come for the Sunday people. Here's that video coming on screen for you now, ladies and gentlemen. Again, a rare moment of honesty from a Prime Minister that lies as if it's going out of fashion.
A vile individual committed a terrorist attack that attacked Jews because they are Jews, and attacked Britain because of our values. And while this is not a new hate, this is something Jews have always lived with, we must be clear. It is a hatred that is rising once again, and Britain must defeat it once again.
Gary, is it an attack on Britain and our values?
Yes, it is. The Jews are simply the first. After they've got the Saturday people, they will go for the Sunday people. That's an old expression. And particularly militant Islamists, Islamic fundamentalists, their next target is the Christian community. We witnessed in Nigeria what really is a genocide, with fundamentalist Islamists murdering Christians. And that is what will happen in future once they feel they have dealt with the Jews. They're going to turn their attention to the Christians next. First the Saturday people, then the Sunday people.
Gary, you can see it.
So I actually got it wrong. I actually got it wrong there. When I first saw this video and I saved it, I was under the impression that it was actually going to come from Keir Starmer, but it doesn't seem that he actually said that. So this other guy, but yeah, he's completely right. He's completely right. So there we go. Let me allow myself to correct my own record here, ladies and gentlemen. It was not, in fact, Keir Starmer that said that. A lot of times when I'm doing these and I'm reacting to these clips, I'm doing them live. So apologies if I do make any mistakes, ladies and gentlemen. But that's a good thing. We watch the clips and we can correct the record together. But he's absolutely right. This guy is absolutely right. And there's obviously people on the right that would say that, Jews are a problem or whatever. And that, usually some people saying Jews need to be remigrated as much as any other group do. My only question for people that would say that would be are you talking about Jews as the ethnic group, just simply Jewish people that would be native to the land that we would now call Israel, let's say that? Or are you talking about people that practice the Jewish faith? Because this is a question I've had with regards to when I see people echoing the sentiment on the right. What if you had somebody that was a native British person, say they come from the native groups of England, Scotland, Wales, Ireland, let's say they come from Celtic descent, for example, and they decided, having researched into the various different faiths and so on, that they were going to convert to Judaism because they thought it was true. They might look at the Bible, might have read it cover to cover, say, I don't think this, like a lot of Jews think, I don't think this Jesus guy was in fact who he said he was. I don't think he was the Messiah. I don't think he was God incarnate. Pardon me. And as a result, I'm going to follow Judaism. I'm going to follow rabbinical Judaism. I just wonder what they would say then, because, it would then show that the problem, if they would say, oh no, we have to remigrate this person to Israel or whatever, you wouldn't be remigrating them because this is their homeland. It's just they're choosing to follow Judaism on a religious level. And then if they were to outlaw that, that's the way I'm thinking about it. If that was to be outlawed or whatever, then it would show that it's not Jews as a people you necessarily have the problem with, seemingly, or at least that's one part of it. You also have a separate problem with the faith. And then obviously that would lead to more questions then, and that would then take you down a rabbit hole towards a particular ideology that obviously a lot of us grew up in school having that heavily demonized with good reason, right? With very, very good reason. But that's where then that logically goes. You can see then you end up going likely down the National Socialism route. So again, that's where I wonder. And then you see a lot of people on the right saying that you can't have nationalism without socialism, and basically just saying it now. And you have groups in Australia, the Nationalist Socialist Network, that are gaining popularity at an unprecedented rate, it seems. So what happens when you have successive governments that betray their people, don't do right by their people, and deliberately inflict these kinds of atrocities on them? Okay, the really sad thing is we're living in the late stages of a Weimar Republic-like government now, the collapse of Rome, if you will, so to speak. And that's a scary, scary time, because we have a historical precedent for what can come next. We have a very good historical precedent for what can come next. That you can't blame people for at least being sick and tired of what is going on. Exactly. Why are we bringing more and more of these people in? It's rich of Keir Starmer to get up on the podium and say, oh yeah, it's all about hate and all of this stuff. He'll never say, as you saw, he'll never say what the root cause is. And none of them in the Labour government, or none of them, especially Shabana Mahmood, we'll go over her remarks in a moment, would ever say that it's because of a particular set of people or particular religious ideology or combination of the two, right? Because that would give the game away. Well, hang on, you've said that diversity and multiculturalism and those two are good and Islamophobia is bad. Islam is so great. But yet now we're seeing the fruits of it, and we've seen the fruits of it across generations now. We've seen the fruits of it across generations. Why won't you call it out? And we're seeing there that it's, what was Shabana Mahmood's remarks? I'll see if I can find it a bit quicker. It'll be coming up in a moment. The only person responsible for this attack is the attacker himself. Nothing to do with, as we'll see a little bit later, some of the things that the mosques and the preachers in the mosques have been saying. Nothing to do with the radicalization that goes on in these communities. By the way, there was a pro-Palestine protest that happened literally on the same day as the murders, which we'll go over in a moment. The media and the government's response has been nothing short of shocking, but it shouldn't surprise you when, not in the aftermath of this attack, but not long ago, when Keir Starmer is talking about securing Britain's borders, he's talking about if you say that these people whatever ethnic group you're talking about, or whatever religious group you're talking about, or whatever, both, the combination of the two you're talking about. If you're talking about any kind of deportations in the wake of Reform's announcement that they were going to scrap indefinite leave to remain, I believe it was, that you are the enemy. And the Prime Minister essentially declared war on most of the people of the country who see what's going on and are very, very dissatisfied with it. Very, very dissatisfied with it, to say the least. But he's saying here, if you say they should now be deported, then you are the enemy. And in this instance, I guess you could say that I am an enemy of national renewal, or Renew Britain, or whatever the hell that mean.
If you say they should now be deported, then mark my words, we will fight you with everything we have, because you are the enemy of national renewal.
If you say that they should now be deported, mark my words, we will fight you with everything that we have, because you are the enemy of national renewal. You put a black and white filter on that, ladies and gentlemen, and you translate it into Russian, right? It's the reason why we call him Kia Stalin, or Stalinist Starmer. But you could very easily hear that coming out of fucking Stalin's mouth, or coming out of Mao's mouth, right? You translate it into Chinese. You could very easily hear that coming out of either one of their mouths. That should give you, again, enough insight into the kind of problem that we're dealing with, ladies and gentlemen. If you know anything about those regimes, about Mao's regime, about Stalin's regime, as you know, the atrocities now managed to get known via Solzhenitsyn and other people and stuff like that. Cambodia and all of these other regimes of communism. This should really, really worry you. This should really, really worry you. And now, Prime Minister is openly coming out and saying that if you stand in his way, they will bring everything that they can against you. And that's what we've been seeing. We've been seeing the judicial system brought against people. We've been seeing outright force via the police brought against people unjustly. All the digital ID and surveillance, incitement and tacit approval of things by the government, where they'll say these things, they'll label people as far right, they'll label people as Islamophobes, all of these things, right? In order to get the communities which will take offense to that, the communities they know that they are violent, to go and keep those people silent via threats, via stalking, via all of these different things, right? The McLaren family, right? Bailey McLaren and his family, the Batley school teacher, right? If they want you silenced, they'll sick these groups on you as well via their words, which is why the words absolutely do matter. Ladies and gentlemen, words absolutely do matter. It's why you should always note when they call you fascist, they call you racist, they call you Nazi, etc. It's designed to justify killing you. That's what it's there for. That's what it's there for. And the establishment wouldn't mind if somebody was to come along and kill you, right? They'd do away with you because you're a problematic voter and you're standing in the way anyway. This was the remark I was talking about. Shabana Mahmood was on GB News. And this one, Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood hits out at Israeli ministers who are blaming Keir Starmer for the Manchester Synagogue attack due to his failure to curb the toxic wave of anti-Semitism in Britain, largely due to the influx of mass Middle Eastern and Muslim migration, right? And you know, areas of, if you want to use a euphemism, Asian, right? Like Afghanistan and Pakistan and all the other areas, right? So the only person responsible for this attack is the attacker himself. But as we'll see in a moment, ladies and gentlemen, you should view that statement with a fair bit of contempt and suspicion.
We're hearing from Israeli ministers who are blaming Keir Starmer for failing to curb a toxic wave of anti-Semitism in Britain. Others saying that this is a consequence to recognising the state of Palestine, that emboldens people who wish to cause harm to the Jewish community. What do you say to that?
Well, firstly, we will not tolerate anti-Semitism in our country. It is utterly wrong. I condemn all acts of anti-Semitism.
Well, there's hateful speech at these pro-Palestine marches.
If you would just let me finish, I think that we have to separate out two different things here. The only person responsible for this devastating attack is the attacker himself. He is the one who bears the responsibility for what has happened. He has been shot dead. There are other arrests that have been made, and the due process of law and our criminal justice system must now take its course. That is separate to what is happening over in the Middle East, and the one thing that this government has been working hard for every single day since coming into office is to fight for a peace process and a peaceful resolution, a ceasefire, and the long-term peace process that we need to bring peace to the people of Israel as well to the people of Palestine.
Well, it doesn't seem to be working. And funnily enough, bringing in a bunch of people from an area of the world with a religious ideology that is possibly the most hostile thing to our civilization and people and customs that we've ever seen, turns out is a very bad idea, ladies and gentlemen. But as we know, the best lies are always married to a kernel of truth, right? The best lies always have a kernel of truth in them. And yes, the person ultimately responsible for this attack is the attacker himself. Just like the person who assassinated Charlie Kirk is ultimately the one who's responsible. Right? But we do have to look at other factors. We do have to look at other factors that Shabana Mahmood does not want to look at, but is blatantly obvious. Fact of the matter is, in these mosques, which is why we should pretty much all be in favour of shutting them down and getting rid of these people, right? They preach this kind of quote-unquote hatred, if you will, because I don't like how the government uses the word hatred. Yes, it is hatred. Yes, it is hatred of Jews, right, as we'll see in a moment. Right, Told TV did an interesting bit on this, which somebody shared recently, which I'll bring up on screen for you now. They preach this kind of hatred, this kind of anti-Semitism, if you will, Jew hatred, genocidal rhetoric, seemingly on a daily basis, or weekly basis, or regular basis at the very least. This preacher inside a mosque, I'm not exactly sure where it is from, but this is in London. No, you can see it on the video now. This is in London. This mosque, but it's not by any means an isolated incident, been recorded calling for Jews to be murdered, and the police have said, police are aware of this, so therefore we can assume that Shabana Mahmood is aware of this. She's the Home Secretary, mind you. They say that no crime was committed. Because we've now gone with this parallel legal system, we've said that the Muslims, for some reason, in particular the Muslims, right, have to be allowed to police themselves, or they have to be able to dictate. They have to dictate how they want to be policed. Which, funnily enough, most people will then say, don't police me. Right, I'm not going to listen to you. And that's where you get weakness in the face of strength is just going to beget more force against you. Right? It's like, crying in the face of a bully, if you will. It's just going to make the bullying worse. Right? They let them get away with everything. But this is the quote-unquote hate speech. Again, I don't like the term, because it's speech people hate. Good thing is, allowing people to say this just allows you to put it on Front Street and understand this is the way that these people think. This is the way that these people think. Talk TV investigation unearths footage of hate preachers. Again, this is one mosque in London, but make no mistake, ladies and gentlemen, it's not an isolated incident. I can promise you that. Video coming on screen now.
Allahu Akbar.
A sermon at the Redbridge Islamic Centre in Ilford. The speaker prays with his congregation in Arabic to curse the Jews and the children of Israel. Talk TV had the recording translated twice independently. It's voiced by an actor.
Oh Allah, curse the Jews and the children of Israel. Oh Allah, curse the infidels and the polytheists. Oh Allah, break their words, shake their feet, disperse and tear apart their unity, and ruin their houses, and destroy their homes.
And from London to Liverpool.
If the 2 billion just marched on Israel, it's all over. These spat in the direction of Israel, 2 billion, it's all over.
To Birmingham.
The stones will speak and say, "Oh Muslim, behind me there is a Yahudi, come and kill him."
Preachers at mosques across Britain.
That last one there, ladies and gentlemen, quite interesting. He's actually quoting, it's either the Quran or the Hadith. where it's speaking about the Garkad tree, and the Garkad tree apparently being a tree of the Jews, so to speak. But it's a command, if you will, or a prophecy, whatever you want to use, right? That even the stones and the trees and everything will cry out to the Muslim, "O Muslim, O slave of Allah, there is a Jew behind me, come and kill him." Okay, that's how deep this goes. That's how deep this goes, ladies and gentlemen. That's what he's saying. This is this is not going to be an isolated incident, right? And the longer these people are here, that's a simple thing. The longer this is tolerated, the more likely more of these things are going to happen. The more likely you're going to see more of them against churches. You're going to see more of them against just people in their communities, right? You're obviously going to see more of them against synagogues, right? So this is definitely an ideology that cannot be tolerated. And it's tolerance that's paved the way for this kind of stuff, right? Yeah, and even when they're talking about Israel, okay, that's a separate issue. But these people want to expand the caliphate. These people want to expand the caliphate all over the world, right? And if you think about it, Christians should be paying attention to this, because many Christian schools of thought outside of dispensationalism and all of these things, term Israel then is thought to mean the new covenant. It's thought to mean the church, right? So from that perspective, you have to wonder, hang on, are these people going to be coming after us as well? Yes, they are. So yes, everybody should be aware of this, because they don't care either if you are irreligious or whatever. If you're irreligious, you're just going to be seen as dingy. Anyway. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, I had to look over there at the moment. There's a little bit of a storm going on outside. And I just heard the bin go outside as well. So yeah, like I was saying, if you're irreligious, they just see you as a dhimmi anyway, because you don't have any kind of principle, right? But if you're on the left, they see you as you're not having any kind of principle. You're very easy to manipulate, and we've seen that time and time again. This is what you're seeing, ladies and gentlemen, where it's brought to note how, again, when it reflects badly on them, when it reflects badly on Shabana Mahmood and the left and all of them, they'll just distance themselves from the attacker, distance themselves from their rhetoric, distance themselves from all of these things. But in the aftermath of Southport, right, Lucy Connolly had to go to prison for what she said. Wayne O'Rourke had to go to prison for being correct about the attacker, right? And then you're seeing there, Zara Sultana come out recently when responding to Tommy Robinson, called him a vile fascist and all of these things, but come up with the phrase saying an attack on one is attack on all. And we should take that, not only with how they think, ladies and gentlemen, but maybe we could apply that to what we've seen against our own people and against our own institutions. Maybe we should see that the attacks that have been perpetrated against our young girls were an attack on all. How 7-7, Lee Rigby, Manchester Arena, all of these things, Southport. An attack on one is an attack on all. And I suppose at this point, with how much we've been taken advantage of, if it's good enough for them, maybe we have to say that it's good enough for us. At least we need to be playing on a level playing field. So if they're going to say, because this is how they view it as well, if one of their crew, if one of their community gets arrested, they see it as an attack on all of them. That's why they go and try and riot against police. That's why they try and, they vandalize police stations in Rochdale and stuff like that when one of them gets arrested, because they see it as an attack on all. Maybe we should start thinking like that. I think it's just going to be a matter of survival at this point, particularly in England. Only because I say that because the problems there are a lot more pronounced. See, again, the map which I showed you in the last episode, the ONS map of the country, is to be believed. I don't think we have the same caliber of problems in Wales, but the Welsh government is deeply insidious and underhanded with how they do things. There's not a lot of data on these things, and they deliberately don't report it, as we highlighted last time. So the problem in Wales could be a lot bigger than it's being given credit for. So you should be ready, ladies and gentlemen. You should be wary. Make no mistake about it. This is where weakness gets you. And again, and they say it's just about Israel, it's just about the Middle East. It's absolutely not. It's absolutely not, because they had then the pro-Hamas demonstrations in the same day, same city as the murders that took place. So here is that that pro-Hamas demonstration, ladies and gentlemen. I'll just bring it up on screen. I won't bring up the volume or the thing, so I want to keep talking. But you can see here they've got the flags. You've got the rainbow flag for some reason, even though, again, it appears to have some weird symbol on it. But the pro-Hamasniks, the Hamas group, don't tend to be very sympathetic to that kind of thing, right, as we know. But this was in the very same city, very same day that these attacks occurred against Jews. So to say, it's bigger than Israel. It's bigger than simply the state of Israel and Bibi Netanyahu and all of this stuff. This is what globalizing the Intifada means. This is what globalizing the Intifada means. And we should be weary of that. We should be absolutely weary of that. Not just weary, but ready at this point. The media reporting has been nothing less than abysmal. However, Connor Tomlinson put this up on X, and he articulated it quite well. This was literally, again, I think not even hours after the attack itself. I'll read you Connor's statement and I'll play you the video then. Sky News used a live announcement that 2 people had died during today's Muslim terror attack on Yom Kippur to remind viewers that Manchester is a, quote, very tolerant, multicultural area. As we covered on the map, it's basically a mini, not very tolerant, it's basically a mini Israel-Gaza-Palestine conflict. And a place where Jewish people and Muslim communities have lived side by side for years. The bodies weren't even cold. Bodies weren't even in the ground, if you will. They weren't even cold and buried before they started repeating the diversity is our strength propaganda. Is that video coming on screen for you in a moment, ladies and gentlemen?
Will have been so busy. And another man told me, which I've heard from a few people around here actually, that this area is a very tolerant area. It's a multicultural area. It's a place where Jewish people and Muslim community, there are large communities of both of those faiths in the area, have lived side by side for years and are understood to be very tolerant of one another. And he just could not believe that something like this would happen, and let alone here in a community where there are multiple different faiths living here. In peace and tolerance. But yes, just confirming that news, and we've had from Greater Manchester Police the 2 members of the public are confirmed now to have died from this attack at the synagogue here in Crupsall. Will have been
so tolerant that, only 2 people died at the time that this was reported, and obviously more died in the aftermath as well with the police and so on. This just goes to show no tragedy is too great for the media, for the government, whatever, to protect what they care about above all else, which is the narrative. They don't care how many people die. They don't care about any of the things. They don't care about how many lives are destroyed. The fact that kids could be now growing up without fathers or mothers, right? Or somebody's lost a brother, somebody's lost a nephew or an uncle, whatever. They don't care. They do not care. They only care about the narrative. They only care about pushing us further and further into what obviously the United Nations want, which is their Agenda 2030 plan. That's all they care about. They don't care about how many lives are destroyed in the process. Pardon me. Make no mistake about it. And again, you have to be careful now, ladies and gentlemen, especially with the BBC. Because this is quite interesting. I'm not sure where this video is from, but it highlights something that is very important. And that is where you have to obviously be careful where you get your information from. Particularly the BBC, which is basically a, pro-Islam, pro-jihad, if you will, hard left-wing outlet now. To the extent they obviously have that statue that's was sculpted by a convicted paedophile, Eric Gill, outside of the young naked boy, and they refuse to take it down. That tells you a lot about the BBC. It tells you a lot when even Orwell was noticing the problems with media and society back in his day, in, the 40s and the 30s. BBC allegedly have been caught changing the translation. Now, it could be the other way around. it could be that the Telegraph changed the translation. So we have two translations in this instance, ladies and gentlemen, of the same video. As we're seeing there, that Talk TV was seemingly good that they'd, well, they claimed at least that they put the recording to two different translators. And obviously then they corroborate with each other. That gives you a good idea that if you have two independent translators, that it gives you a good idea that the information is accurate, that the translation is accurate if the two match up. In this video, BBC have allegedly been caught changing the translation of what this lady said to make it more palatable. What they've done, seemingly, is they changed Jews and jihad in this instance, which again, they think people wouldn't notice this because they can understand little bits. If they don't speak Arabic, for example, you can make out certain words like jihad, for example, and we know what that means, right? And we might realize or recognize terms like, is it Yehud? I think is another term that they use. I believe it means Jews. I might have that wrong, but we can recognize these little things that we hear time and time and time again, right? Even if we don't have a good grasp of the language, we can, it's like you hear something over and over and over, you can make out certain words that let you know that, hang on, this is not being reported accurately. So this is the video, ladies and gentlemen, BBC changing Jews and jihad to Israeli forces. That's what they changed it to. And the Telegraph translation underneath to show you what the person actually said. Check this out, ladies and gentlemen. If this is true, then this is, again, you should have stopped paying your license fee a hell of a long time ago.
بس أكدت لنا هاي الفيديوهات إنه هو ما كانش متخبي تحت الأرض، إنه بالعكس هو بقاوم بجاهد ضد اليهود. بس أكدت لنا هاي الفيديوهات إنه هو ما كانش متخبي تحت الأرض، إنه بالعكس هو بقاوم بجاهد ضد اليهود.
So there you go. I'll play it one more time for you, ladies and gentlemen. I'll just bring it back a moment. Bring myself in. Boom. So you can see here, BBC one is on the top, Telegraph is on the bottom. It's the same video, and here is the translation in the subtitle.
بس أكدت لنا هاي الفيديوهات إنه هو ما كانش متخبي تحت الأرض، إنه بالعكس هو بقاوم بجاهد.
So you can see there, the first one says fighting and resisting Israeli forces. Now let's allow it to play with the Telegraph translation.
ضد اليهود. بس أكدت لنا هاي الفيديوهات إنه هو ما كانش متخبي تحت الأرض، إنه بالعكس هو بقاوم بجاهد.
So there you go. You can recognize jihad. I just paused it there, but you can recognize jihad. And it says, and jihad against the Jews. So again, if true, ladies and gentlemen, you should have stopped paying your license fee a long time ago because you shouldn't be paying any money to disgusting, hard left-wing paedophile supporters. But this just goes to show the lengths that the media will go to cover up for our enemies as well. And that they're basically an enemy institution. They're basically an enemy institution at this point and have done so for a long time. And speaking of enemy institutions, ladies and gentlemen, the last big thing from this to go over and why at this point I see a lot of people, pardon me, with the things that are going on, especially with regards to digital ID and all of these things, mass immigration, etc. See a lot of people putting up petitions and all things like this, right? And I sort of become very disillusioned with petitions, rather sadly. Because I don't see them as doing anything. They're basically just people, opinion polling to the government. And I don't think people realize how little the government gives a shit. It's good for seeing public sentiment on it. It's a little bit like a poll, right? It's a little bit like a poll, but people think you get millions of signatures on a petition and think it's going to have drastic changes. It's not. It's not. Petitions are not going to work to bring about the changes that we need. That's absolutely true. Because this is something that Alex Armstrong, I believe is another GB News anchor, put up recently. He's a presenter on GB News. He's on Alex Armstrong tonight, Saturday and Sunday from 9 p.m. What happened was the government responded to a petition that had at least 2,753,000 signatures at one point, saying do not introduce digital ID. Digital ID, extremely unpopular policy, was not ever campaigned on. right? But it's been something that's been slowly building towards through successive administrations, right? As a measure to clamp down in like a China socialist, communist surveillance state social credit system, right? Society, social credit society. The first line is, we will introduce digital ID. So they literally just got back to Alex in this instance. The government has responded to the petition you signed. Do not introduce digital ID cards. Government responded. First line, we will introduce digital ID within this parliament to help tackle illegal immigration. So not to mention, first off, that this is an absolute lie. Obviously, it's an absolute fucking lie. But I'm going to bring something up on screen for you now. This is the actual letter that he shared, ladies and gentlemen. I'll bring it up on screen. And it also says, making government services easier and enable wider efficiencies. Not true. Not true by any means. It's designed for control. That's all it's designed for. It tells you a lot when even, let me bring myself into here a minute. Tells you a lot when even Clive Lewis and other Labour MPs have spoken out against this kind of stuff, right? And many others, even Adnan Hussein, who I brought up in the last episode talking about the Southport thing and in my opinion, the false story, which I think is far too convenient regarding Axel Rudikabana and his asinine assertion for an apology. Even they see seemingly where this is going and that this is not a good thing, right? But look at what it says at the bottom, ladies and gentlemen. You can just about see it. I'll read it for you. We are committed to making people's everyday lives easier and more secure. So putting more control in their hands, as a flagrant lie, because it's all about more control in the government's hands, and driving growth through harnessing digital technology. We also want to learn from countries which have digitized government services for the benefit of their citizens, in line with our manifesto. That is where the most egregious lie comes in, ladies and gentlemen, because it was never in their manifesto. It's a bare-faced lie, ladies and gentlemen. That's what I said. Whenever they claim to be doing something that is good for you, 9 times out of 10, it is just a bare-faced lie. I have a feeling that even with the slim amount of votes that they got, which allowed them via the first past the post system to get the majority that they did, right? Contrary to what people may think, and again, people in America, I've seen it, why did people vote for this? We didn't. Fact of the matter is, I think they had, what was it, about, out of a voter turnout of about 50%, I can't remember what exactly it was, but it worked out to the overall voter base that they could have had, they had about 20%. The administration that we're being ruled by at the moment had 20% of the country vote for them, thereabouts. And yet this is the power that they've been given. This is what they can do. They have no mandate for this. It's not like in President Trump's case where he won the House. Is it the House, the Senate, and the popular vote? Is that what it's called? For the first time in I think it's 20 years, a Republican president won the popular vote. It's not like that where you had a clean sweep of everything and you have a mandate to rule. About 20% of people asked for this. And I got a feeling if they knew what was going to be happening with digital ID, even a large part of them would have said no. A large part of them would have voted a very different way. So we'll see where this goes, ladies and gentlemen. We'll see where this goes. On to now some things which we talked about last time with regards to, so that was a long section on that, but obviously it's a truly tragic incident that happened. Some more things from the Vale of Glamorgan councillors meeting that we saw on the last episode, where George Carroll was being gaslit into trying to retract a statement that he didn't make. Right, where the Labour guy, Elliot Penn, I believe it is, tried to get him to retract a statement that he didn't even make, trying to make him say that he needs to retract the statement that France is a safe country, by saying that he needs to take back and say that migrants can apply for asylum in whatever country they want. They don't need to go to the neighbour country that they're next to. Right, it wasn't the point that Councillor Carroll was making. Point that Councillor Carroll was making was that France is a safe country, and so if they're applying for asylum from there, it should be viewed with massive scrutiny, right? In many instances, it should not be accepted because it is a safe country. It has been one of the many countries, pretty much all of the European countries, which are not safe for their native populations outside of Poland and Hungary, I guess. They are safe countries. They've been designated as safe countries. So when they're going through multiple safe countries to get to Britain, there's an ulterior motive as to why. Credit where credit is due for Councillor Carroll for standing his ground. Ever since that episode, I've seen a couple more things that have... You know, I sung his praises a lot in the last episode, but I've seen a couple of images now where he's, looking very smiley. I've seen one image of him looking very smiley alongside a 20 is plenty sign. So again, that's a black mark in my book. But again, I don't know the guy. He seems to have a good head on his shoulders for the most part. But when you see things like that, it's like, nobody's perfect. At the end of the day, nobody's perfect, right? Certainly not myself, obviously. But somebody who's certainly not perfect, it would seem, and this is a case now where I can't but think that this is just the natural female mothering instinct, where these people have been driven mad by feminism because it's conned them out of their own best interests in many ways. That now that natural mothering instinct that women have is now going wild, right? And they've now gone from seeing literal children that they could have, right, if they weren't locked up in this feminist mindset and in many ways completely insufferable, right? They realized how much they've been conned out of their own happiness and their own fulfillment, that now instead of having a literal baby to, push that urge towards, right, and to actually take care of, they've now decided they need to take care of the world, right? And that means allowing all manner of third worlder in to ravage our nations, right? It won't be them that suffers, right? It won't be them in their lovely gated communities with their high salaries that suffer. No, it'll be working class communities like mine that suffer, right? They don't care. Either they don't care or they're just stupidly ignorant of it. They can't look at the examples in England and see, where this stuff goes, bad things happen. Councillor Samantha Campbell has a migrant hotel in her community. But instead of standing up for her residents, she said that budget pressures weren't a problem. And empathy does not have country boundaries. Empathy does not have country boundaries. Well, tell that to Cardinal Sarah, for example. Tell that to Cardinal Sarah that has, said that these people should not be coming to Europe in decadence, right? They should not be coming to Europe in decadence. It's better for them to, accept the truth and accept the positives to their society via the Gospels, via Christianity, etc., in their own communities, in their own homes. Tell that to Mr. Sarah. Right, and those who use, I'm not saying that, Samantha Campbell is using the Gospels or using the Bible to justify mass migration or anything like that, right? But again, people who do this, Cardinal Sarah described them as being bewitched, ladies and gentlemen. I don't think he's far off with this one, not gonna lie. Here's that video for you from the Senedd Waste guys, ladies and gentlemen.
Although the county, city and nation of sanctuary statuses can be viewed as merely symbolic policies in some part, the reasoning behind it and weight that it carries is most definitely not. Born as a pushback from the hostile environment for illegal immigrants in the UK, created under previous governments, the policies are instrumental in establishing a strong base within our ever-changing communities.
Doesn't that say a lot, ladies and gentlemen? Let me pause it a minute. Doesn't that say a lot? She said there that the nation of sanctuary stuff, born as a pushback against a hostile environment for illegal migrants. So they're outright saying there that her ideology, which is very much in common with Plaid, very much in common with the Greens and Labour, is pro-illegal migration, is pro-invasion. Ladies and gentlemen, they do it under the guise of asylum seekers, but they're outright saying that they baby, which if you criticize, mock in any way, like I found out, ladies and gentlemen, they will call you all manner of names and they will belittle you however they can. They'll call you a chihuahua sent to bark, ladies and gentlemen. If you even use their own words to describe their own ideas. Literally they're saying it. This ideology, this system that we are prizing pretty much above all else, is born out of a hostile environment to illegal aliens. Yeah, because we don't want them here. for the most people who aren't outright anti-immigration, for example, and due to how much we've seen the system gamed, many people have indeed become more anti-immigration as a whole, right? In many areas, right, many ways, we outright need net emigration. If you don't use the term remigration, which I do, but we need net emigration, absolutely, for a long time. She's saying that the residents that she is for are for everybody else around the world who would use any means to come here for whatever reason, not her own constituents, as she said, to protect. That's dangerous. That's dangerous. And she needs to be voted out. Guys in Glamorgan, you need to vote her out. Another thing you might want to know about Councillor Campbell, ladies and gentlemen, is that this year, somebody submitted a Freedom of Information Act request against her. It wasn't honoured, as we'll get onto in a moment. Someone by the name of Emma Robertson, and this will be linked down below if you want to go and check out this thread yourself, ladies and gentlemen, issued a Freedom of Information Act request in April of this year to the Vale of Glamorgan Council, asking them to disclose all official warnings of Councillor Samantha Campbell of the Roos Ward, the warnings that she has received because of her behaviour, including the dates and nature of warnings that were issued. She alleges that there have been at least 5 occasions that the councillor has received warnings, and it is in the public interest that these are disclosed. I would agree. They go back to her about nearly a week later, so from the 4th to the 10th, right? They go back to her, Freedom of Information Act request under the Freedom of Information Act 2000. Just again, boilerplate response. Your request is being handled. You've got this number. You should receive the information requested within 20 working days, unless the council does not hold the information or there is a reason for it to be withheld. 20 working days. So that would then put it at about April 30th. 20 working days. From their response, it would be 24th of April from the time that from Miss Robinson or Mrs. Robertson, submitted the request. But if we take it from the time that Vale of Glamorgan Council responded, it would be 30th of April. Fast forward then, ladies and gentlemen, 8th of May. 8th of May. This will be linked down below if you want to see it, ladies and gentlemen. The thread for this will be linked down below. She got back to the Vale of Glamorgan Council. I would appreciate if you could respond to my request as by law. A normal response should have been received by 7th of May. So she waited a day after the normal response should have been received, which in this case it should have seemingly been even sooner than that, right? Or maybe they have a month to respond or whatever, I don't know. So already, what would that be? So we've got 20 days, so that would be the 30th, and then so you're looking at about nearly a month, obviously, nearly a month. It's after a month since she submitted her initial request. She still hasn't shared anything. Then, it wasn't until the 13th of May that Vale of Glamorgan Council got back to her. Just we apologise, we're still awaiting a response. Told that everything that the government is doing has been supposedly to increase efficiency. Yet Miss Robertson in this instance was still waiting. 13th of May, 2025. We have been considering the matter, which has taken longer than anticipated. Then we go to the 5th of June, ladies and gentlemen, another month later, after she submitted her second request on the 8th of May. Nearly a month later. Dear FOI unit, the Vale of Glamorgan Council are now very late in their response, despite committing to replying to my Freedom of Information request by no later than May 16th, 2025. By law, they should have responded in full by May 7th, and as such, I would appreciate if you could escalate. She's tried 3 times now. Once in April, once in May, once in June. Finally, on the 16th of June, so another week and a half later, they then say, you're not getting it. We're not going to disclose the information. We believe the information you have requested is exempt in accordance with Section 40 in brackets 2 of the Freedom of Information Act 2000. This exemption covers the personal data of third parties where complying with the request would breach any of the principles in the General Data Protection Regulation, also known as GDPR, of 2018. We believe that this information would not be fair or lawful and would breach Principle A. The legal definition of personal information contained in the GDPR Act of 2018 is information that relates to a living individual who can be identified from the information or from other information held or likely to be held by the data controller. This, of course, includes names and addresses. However, it would include a wider range of other information which could be used to identify individuals. So presumably, this would not be because it would identify anything to do with Miss Campbell herself, because she would be the subject of these things. So naturally, you would expect it to find out her information. Third parties, so who might we consider that be? It might be people that have submitted complaints against it, the people that have submitted the complaints against it. But surely they can just easily redact that information. Surely they could just put claimant or complainant or whatever it is and redact their information, including their addresses. Right? They could keep the nature of the complaint within there, but it seems to me as though the Vale of Glamorgan Council are trying to use the GDPR legislation in a way to stop people from finding out what the nature of these complaints were. And that is very suspect. That is very suspect indeed. Now, I'm not a legal expert. This is not legal advice. This is not me asserting that I really know anything about this law. That is just the way that I am reading it. That is my opinion. Maybe, ladies and gentlemen, you've had experience with this yourself. Maybe you've submitted Freedom of Information Act requests yourself. Maybe you've dealt with this kind of stuff. Let me know. Am I on the right lines in the comments or whatever? Or if you have any more information about this, please reach out. This is very suspect indeed. So there have been 5 complaints, 5 recorded complaints put against Councillor Campbell. Then her constituents have a right to know what those complaints were about. Her constituents, the people she represents, have a right to know what those complaints are about. Especially then, when we're seeing here, her ideology that she's pushing is not in the interest of her own constituents. It's the interest of furthering the globalist agendas that are ruining England, ruining all of our countries of Europe, etc., and will ruin Wales as well. In many ways, they already have. Net zero mass migration. Mass migration doesn't seem, at least if the maps on ONS are accurate, don't seem to have affected us much yet, but they certainly have affected the cities. And we're already seeing, with the small amount that we've got, with foreign councillors lying on the floors of their council meetings, right, as we talked about last time with Bablin Malik, right, that they're pushing all of this diversity and multiculturalism nonsense and labelling just regular Welsh people that are concerned about their country, concerned about the direction it's going, and seeing the government tyranny and seeing how they're using immigration as a weapon to subvert democracy, as far right, as racist, as all of these things, giving them these disgusting labels which mark them for death, make no mistake about it. Yeah, you can't blame people for being sick and tired of that. And it's definitely not in their best interests. Despite the fact that sadly I saw one of the elderly women that was being interviewed recently, and she said that I would never vote Labour again, but I'm going to vote Welsh, so I'm going to vote Plaid. That really did make me sad. How little seemingly she would understand how much Plaid have changed, maybe in recent times versus how they were in the 60s and so on. And obviously she would have been a lot younger. This is a old age pension that we're talking about now, ladies and gentlemen. It was a very sad video. It's a very, very sad video. It's not the only one, though, ladies and gentlemen. County of Sanctuary supporter Emma Goodjohn says, we're part of a worldwide community. This is something that they don't see Wales as, you know, a set nation, as a set home for a certain people, right? And that the political system should represent those people above all else. No. And that her town is built on immigration. That's a lie, ladies and gentlemen. If the census is to be believed, that's a lie. As I'll show you in a moment. Here is Ms. Goodjohn extolling, again, the virtues of diversity, multiculturalism, immigration, and so on, and just seemingly outright lying, as all of these leftists do, on the floors of their council without shame.
A county of sanctuary would provide refuge and support across our wider and local community, thereby reducing inequality for all. A county of sanctuary for all would encourage and work to build a culture of welcome and hospitality in all contexts, including hard-to-reach communities. We are part of a worldwide community where this town, the largest in Wales, has been built on immigration since the days of the docks and historically welcomed people from all over the world.
Enough of this shit. It's like saying that, black people built America and stuff like that. Stephen Crowder did an amazing bit on this, where I saw it the other day saying that, hang on, supposedly you have black slaves that built the great nation that is America, and in many ways they'll try to say they built Europe and all the rest of it as well, right? But then you look over into Africa and you wonder why they haven't made a super America or a super Europe manifest over there. So the fact that you have the two groups in common, because in Africa they still practice slavery, by the way, and they enslave their own people, right? You got to think, if you're in the slave trade, bad thing happened. Where did we get the slaves from, and who was selling them? Right. Not to mention there's still a Middle Eastern slave trade and all around the world that's going on. Funnily enough, particularly benevolent that in Europe, throughout the British Empire and throughout the Americas, right, United States of America, that they made the decision based on greater principles and greater goods to abolish slavery, despite the fact that many others around the world still do it, selling their own brothers and sisters into slavery. But both groups have black slaves, but only one of them became massively technologically advanced. Funnily enough, when you had Rhodesia, when it was the British running it, and when they were run out, when it became Zimbabwe, all the progress, all of the technological advancements, all of the civilization that Rhodesia brought, gone. They went back to living in huts and so on. Just goes to show that the narrative that Wales, the narrative that Britain, the narrative that America was built on immigration or built on America in this instance would be settlers, but built by anything other than natives is pure bollocks. It's absolutely pure bollocks, ladies and gentlemen. If you have a look at their constituency, again, we're talking here about Vale of Glamorgan. In this instance, it would seem, because I believe this is from the same meeting. You can see here again, GDE Carroll. So I think this was the same meeting. There was the Vale of Glamorgan meeting in the Vale of Glamorgan, which you can see here, ladies and gentlemen, as I'll bring it up on screen for you in a moment. Oh, I believe my... hang on, guys. I think my... Hang on a minute. I need to refresh the page. Uno momento. Okay, right. I think I got it back. So, if you go here, ladies and gentlemen, and you check out, again, just for example, the ethnic breakdown of the Vale of Glamorgan, you will see there's 94.6% white. 94.6%. To say that it was built on immigration and all of these things, I think at least is an egregious lie that is massively insulting to the memories and to the work of our forebears and our ancestors that did build and did spend a whole lives toiling in awful conditions, right, in the pursuit of a greater good, in the pursuit of, honoring a higher power, to build these lands that we take for granted. And I saw really famous, well, not really famous, but semi-famous political activist Pete North. I talked about him a little while ago. I believe he took a brief sojourn in Wales recently, and he liked my post when I quote posted his thing, and it said home, because he even said that Wales is, impeccably beautiful. And it absolutely is. It absolutely is. When you get past the eyesores of the giant windmills and giant solar panels on farmland, it absolutely is. It's one of the most beautiful places on the planet, especially the valleys, and we take it for granted. Ladies and gentlemen, we absolutely take it for granted. That can be said as well for many of the countryside plains in England, right? Be said for Scotland, same could be said for Ireland. We take this land, we take our home for granted, ladies and gentlemen. People are counting on that. Your politicians are counting on that so they can give it away to foreigners who, because our birth rates are massively declining through the floor at the moment, they're banking on those people to give them the vote so they can stay in power. They don't care if we go extinct as a people. They don't care. They do not care at all. They prefer that, probably, if anything. If it means that they get to keep their cushy job and they get to get more people in that will live off the state, live off the welfare, and just shut up and get on with things, right? Shut up and just get on with doing nothing, right? Won't care about being politically active and wanting to own a big business or whatever, wanting to actually do something with their lives. Again, to say that our communities, our country or whatever was built on immigration, in my opinion, is disgusting to the memory of our ancestors that built it brick by brick. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, speaking of the leftists in our government, one that never ceases to make me laugh, and how they get taken seriously, I'll never know. The leader that they put in is basically like a weird kind of Destiny clone, as far as I can tell, the way that he talks. The Green leader, Zack Polanski, and they recently had a conference, right? It seemed to be attended by a good number of people. Zack Polanski made a couple of remarks of this, which is important for us to bear in mind, ladies and gentlemen, because the Greens, although they sort of see, a lot of people see them, I think I certainly do, as the butt of a lot of jokes. Surprises, upsets can happen, and it's important to keep an eye on all of your opposition, right? A couple of things that he said, and it just really gets me how much of our politics nowadays relies on foreign issues, right? Foreign conflicts, all of these things, and how, as Charlie Kirk said on the floor of the Oxford Union, how we are so caught up with whatever else going on all across the world that we won't look at ourselves. We won't look at what's going on in our own country. We won't take control of our own affairs, right? We go on Israel, 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 right? But we won't look at what's going on in our own communities and how they're being taken over and how in many instances they've been outright ethnically cleansed, right? And the fact that our government is actively championing and campaigning for it under the guise of diversity and equality and inclusion, all of these things, and multiculturalism, right? How we won't bring ourselves to address, at least in these like liberal, liberal woke circles, of addressing the rape of Britain and the threat that immigration and the threat that ethno-religious supremacy that many of these people are bringing into the country pose, right? And the fact that just because it's going on in England, predominantly in areas of Scotland at the moment, it started creeping into the Welsh cities. But the reason we should care, ladies and gentlemen, the reason you should absolutely care, is because we are landlocked to each other. Their problems with regards to immigration, ethno-religious conflict, etc., are our problems. Because within a day from London, they could be up in Scotland, or they could be in Cardiff and they could be in your homes. Within a day, because we are landlocked to each other, and we live in an age where, whereas it might have taken you several days or weeks to travel up country before, literally on horse and cart, you can do it in a matter of hours now. We should absolutely care. Even if you live far away, even if you live down at the other end of frigging Wales, down in Fishguard and St. David's and all the rest of it, you should absolutely care about the boats coming in at Dover. Because within a matter of days, they could be in your town. And the populations of those towns tend to be quite small. It wouldn't take much to replace them. And we've seen that when literally the government supplants the population of many towns with migrants right on the doorstep of that town in a hotel or in a HMO. All right. Somebody, by the way, recently blew the whistle that Caerphilly Council were trying to get them to use, I believe it was a 17-room or 17-person HMO to house illegal migrants. Yes, it's in Caerphilly, ladies and gentlemen. Somebody put a post up on Facebook earlier on today. I can't remember if I saved that post. I'll see if I can bring it up for you next time. But one of the main things that Zack Polanski seemed to be going on about was the whole refugees welcome thing, was that Keir Starmer is an active participant in the murdering and genocide of Palestinians, right? So again, Israel, 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 migrants, 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 everything on foreign issues, ladies and gentlemen. He also said that we should, according to some people I've seen, de-prescribe Palestinian Action, the recent group that was prescribed as a terrorist organisation because of what they did at RAF Bryce Norton. and backing the legalization of all drugs. Yes, I'm not joking, ladies and gentlemen. Strap in. This was the first clip that was shared on Politics UK. It says that Keir Starmer is an active participant in the murdering of Palestinians. I think what seems to be more, shocking than this is just how many people seem to get up and give him a standing ovation when he says this. And the fact that literally, other than that, the only policy that they have for Britain is eat the rich. That's literally the only idea that they have.
Keir Starmer, in one of the most deeply cynical and morbid acts I've seen in my lifetime, decides to recognise a Palestinian state at the same moment that his government is an active participant in the murdering of the Palestinians, then we will never be silent. Let it be heard across our country, but a call that is now echoing around the world. We must stop selling arms to Israel. We must stop sharing intelligence. We will do everything we can to stop the genocide.
Now, what gets me, talk about the Israel-Palestine conflict if you want. I've seen many people calling it a genocide now. Many people are insinuating that October the 7th was, because Israel had prior knowledge of it, was maybe used as the impetus to go in and ethnically cleanse Gaza, right? Starting to think, regardless of whether you think it's good or bad, just or not, that was essentially going to be the only course of action, really. That doesn't mean that every Palestinian, every Gazan has to be killed, right? It doesn't mean that it has to be a genocide in that sense. But the fact of the matter really is that when it's just so oil and water like it is in this region, is that from Israel's perspective, you can't have this, just completely hostile, non-negotiable neighbor on your doorstep. And I suppose from the Palestinian side, you see this as a settler colonialism thing. And I suppose in that way, you could then see why they don't want that on their doorstep either. When it's just you keep having heads butting like this, eventually one side is going to have to give way, right? Eventually one side is going to have to give way in some way. Whether that means Egypt takes in the Palestinians from Gaza and Jordan takes in the Palestinians from Judea and Samaria, but whatever way it's going to be, doesn't mean that millions and millions have to die, right? But again, other than that, I don't see how you're going to solve the conflict. I don't like that outcome. Let's make no mistake about it. I don't like that outcome, right? Don't like that innocent Gazans are held under the thumb of Hamas, and that there's, a case that could be made that Israel is playing on that to get its way in terms of its political aims, and as a result, they don't only have their own government and Hamas against them, they have Israel kind of against them as well. And so the regular innocent Gazans that may be the ones protesting this are caught between two rocks and hard places. I don't like that. I don't like that children are dying. Nobody likes it. Right, but I just don't see what other alternative you're going to have, just purely pragmatically. I'm hoping that some positive, well, if you can call it positive, that's that's the wrong word, but that some kind of peaceful arrangement can be made. But again, we've seen this time and time again. When Yasser Arafat, and I can't remember the Israeli Prime Minister's name at the time, went to Camp David with Clinton. The closest we got to it was the Abraham Accords with Trump in the first administration. Trump's now getting a lot of flack for, obviously, his support for Israel, and it's just such a divisive issue. But again, look at the response it gets. Couldn't we have this response if a politician said that they were going to use our forces to clean out the communities where these disgusting gang rapes have taken place with the Pakistani grooming gangs, for example? Would you get the same cheer? Would you get the same cheer for your own young girls and protecting them, getting rid of the communities that did these disgusting, heinous acts to them? Shows how warped our priorities have become. Because we've been indoctrinated into thinking that any care for us as a people and as a nation is a bad thing. Something, therefore, is logically going to fill that gap. And in this instance, it's all the focus on the foreign stuff. But you're putting your focus on the foreign stuff all the time, you lose track of what's going on at home. And then you end up with the problems that we've got. And we need to bring the focus back. You say all this, you can have your positions on it. And admittedly, foreign policy is obviously very important. But the primary focus needs to be at home, because we have enough problems at home. And again, if it is really a genocide, for example, and you think it's a genocide, call it out. But at least put the majority of your resources into, dealing with the problems at home. But that's a priority. That's for us to prioritize. We've, prioritized foreign issues for far too long now. That's where he says again here. He declares that migrants and refugees are welcome here. The threat is from a politics that tries to divide us and point the finger at each other instead of billionaires. This is a nation of neighbours. It was, but then some people decided, Mr. Polanski, that they weren't going to be so neighbourly.
Prime Minister might call this an island of strangers. When Farage says jump, Labour might say how high. But the Greens will never dance to the tune of a Trump-loving, tax-avoiding, science-denying, NHS-dismantling corporate stooge. You might as well stay on your feet, because I'm going to say, we'll say it loud, we'll say it clear. Migrants and refugees are welcome here.
Terrifying, but fair play. He's obviously very charismatic. He's got them in the palm of his hand. Ladies and gentlemen, you have to give that to him. He has those people in the palm of his hand, eating out of the palm of his hand. So fair play. One thing that is quite interesting there, though, I'm just going to go back and see if I can find the actual thing. He says there, science denying NHS dismantling. And this is, I believe, something that is not true. But it is something that the left has been peddling nonetheless. That they say that they're going to dismantle the NHS and so on. Right? I want to, apologies a sec, ladies and gentlemen. I thought I grabbed the clip. I did not grab the clip. There we go. This is the clip I wanted to grab. So, this is something that I feel is important to clear up, because, you know me, I've been very critical of reform. I saw that Lee Anderson was down in Caerphilly recently, which was good to see. Right, it's a long journey to make, and it's not his constituency, so that's very much appreciated. I think they're going to be the lesser of all the evils, to be honest. Just doing good things, seemingly a lot of common sense things, like raising the tax-free allowance to $20,000 a year. A lot of scrapping the net zero and scrapping the nation of sanctuary nonsense. They're doing a lot of good things in that regard. One of the things that's been said about them, though, which I feel is unfair, and I think if you have criticisms of them, throw them at the way, particularly their treatment of Rupert Lowe, particularly how underhanded they've been and how establishment-like a lot of their figures are, particularly it seems that Nigel Farage, in particular, has a massive ego problem. The deportations plan, especially for England, is nowhere near sufficient. 600,000 in the first term, not going to be anywhere near enough. Kind of seemingly, I'm not sure if the rhetoric has changed on it now, because I think I might have saw something, but I can't remember. I don't even think they would bring themselves to say net negative immigration is, believe the term that Rupert Lowe was using recently. Net negative immigration. I don't think you'd ever hear them using the term remigration and stuff like that, partly because I think that they do want to take advantage of that vote that's come in. I think that's why they've installed Zahir Yusuf as chairman. I think they want to leech off that vote a little bit. Maybe it's a smart play in the short term to get into power so that then they can make the changes that they want. But again, why should we trust them? Why should we trust them? But one lie that does seem to have been peddled about them quite a lot, which I feel is important to clear up, is that they're going to dismantle the NHS. And that does appear that it is not so. This is Laura Ann Jones, who is the Senedd member for Reform. I believe she's the only Reform Senedd member, I believe, for South Wales East. And she's here clearing up some misconceptions on the floor of the Senedd, saying that the Welsh NHS will remain free at point of delivery and free prescriptions will remain. It was good to have the opportunity to set out Reform's clear position on the NHS, as other parties in Wales try to scaremonger and spread misinformation on Reform policy. She needs a grammar checker. She needs to get a Grammarly subscription. But it does seem that they are worried. But this is Laura Ann Jones from the floor of the Senedd, ladies and gentlemen, clearing up that bit, which I want to clear up as well. It does seem, like we've seen, the left lies like it's going out of fashion, that Zack Polanski was indeed lying about Reform's position, at least in Wales, on the NHS.
Deputy Presiding Officer, can I start by thanking the Welsh Conservatives for bringing forward this debate today? Not only does it give us all a chance to talk about the most important area of Welsh Government responsibility, it also gives me a chance to set the record straight about Reform and the NHS. For the sake of telling the truth, as this something this Senedd claims to, and it should, uphold and value, though it seems to only believe that when it suits their own agendas, let me be absolutely clear. As the people of Wales deserve the truth, not misinformation, even if it means that some of you will now have to update your Caerphilly by-election leaflets. When Reform forms a government next May, the NHS will remain free at the point of delivery, and free prescriptions will remain just that, free.
So there you go. Straight from the MS of Wales for Reform, straight from Reform's MS, South Wales East, sorry. NHS will remain free at point of service, and free prescriptions will remain. That is their pledge. Whether they will uphold it remains to be seen. But at least you can't accuse them of saying they're going to dismantle the NHS, they're going to do all of this, when that seems not to be true. Or either that, or they just barefaced lying. If they're to be believed, which I think, you can give people the benefit of the doubt. I don't think you can do that as much on the left at the moment, because they've seen that they don't, they've shown that they don't deserve it, right? Well, at least I suppose we can give them the benefit of the doubt now. That's the best information that we've got on that at the moment. So again, NHS will remain free at point of delivery, and free prescriptions will remain, according to Reform's MS, Laura Ann Jones, which would go in direct refutation to what Zack Polanski just said. Now, whether, again, that is being upheld by, by the Reform in England, who's to say? Who's to say? But I suppose we'll see. We've got a little while to go till next May. Hopefully we can get the traitors out. And who knows? I think a Reform government is pretty... as far as getting anything on the right, as far as getting anything resembling a right-wing government, I think Reform is going to be the most likely outcome. But I think, as we've seen now, because of how nefarious the lefties are, that they'll outright say, I think Mark Drakeford was saying, that their only goal, they do see Reform, I think, as a viable threat. Their only goal is keeping Reform out, so they will form any kind of coalition they can in order to keep Reform out. So again, they'll happily tout that democracy is under threat, this and that, when anybody's saying anything that they don't like. And then the minute that it seems as though a threat to their power will come, they will throw all manner of pretense out the window, and do the same thing that they did to Marine Le Pen in France, but we will see. I mentioned as well, can't remember where the post is, but apparently Zack Polanski said that we should deprescribe Palestine action. I want to give you a little bit of insight to why we prescribed Palestine action in the first place, ladies and gentlemen. So, incident, June 2025. June this year, RAF Bryce Norton. There were members of this group who broke into the RAF base, vandalized 2 Airbus Voyager military aircraft by spraying red paint into their engines and allegedly causing further damage with crowbars. I'll go through a BBC article in a moment which shows you some of the footage from the Bryce Norton attack. This led to them being prescribed under the Terrorism Act of 2000, right? All in all, when I asked Grok how much damage had been done in terms of fiscal amount, and I believe Reuters also corroborated this, where this attack, ladies and gentlemen, police statement, according to Grok and according to Reuters, caused £7 million, about £7 million, or about $9.55 million worth of damage to 2 aircraft at the Bryce Norton Royal Air Force Base. That is why they've been prescribed, ladies and gentlemen. So when you see people that there was a lot of big, massive propaganda effort that I believe it was actually a disabled war veteran that was sat in a wheelchair, I believe it was, and he got hoisted away by police for simply holding a sign. Problem is that whether you disagree with, at this point, Palestine actually being prescribed as a terror group, that they are indeed prescribed as a terror group, and as a result, you'll get charged with supporting a terror group if you protest or hold up things in support of them. It'd be like the same if you're supporting Hizb ut-Tahrir or the Islamic State or whatever, but you tend to get away with those, right? So this is where we are, right? So it's just important to know that, what happened, and that this is how radical they are. They want to deprescribe a group that's been prescribed as a terror organization. In my opinion, I think you have good reason to do so. Good-natured people and protesters don't break into RAF bases and damage RAF aircraft, right? We have no reason to do that. As people of the nation, we have no reason to do that. We're shooting ourselves in the foot if we do that. But here's some of the stuff from the BBC talking about this incident, ladies and gentlemen, if you missed it when it came around in June last year. Oh, didn't want to play it. There we go.
Understand that the protesters breached the perimeter somewhere else. We've driven a long way around, and there are weaker spots, perhaps covered in foliage, trees in front of them, slightly smaller fences, no barbed wire, and that would probably be slightly easier to access. What the footage shows is them riding e-scooters so they could quickly get to the aircraft that they were able to spray with red paint last night. What the MOD has said is that they were already reviewing security at the various bases it has across the country. This will make that a more urgent priority. They've also said they're still assessing the damage to the aircraft.
So let's pause that a minute because I want to bring it back. This is what happens. You can see there, ladies and gentlemen, if I bring it back to here, this is the red paint, as you can see, that was sprayed into the engine of one of the aircraft. Apparently they've done additional damage with crowbars as well, but they got to the aircraft via using the e-bikes or the e-scooters and stuff like that. So I think you have a good case to prescribe them as a terror organization, especially for the damage that they caused, which obviously will be footed by the taxpayer. 4 were arrested over the pro-Palestine vandalism at UK Air Force Base. So yeah, that's the fact of the matter is he's campaigning for the de-prescription of a terrorist group that is working on behalf of radical Islamic interests. Not in favor of that whatsoever. I think you should be concerned about that. Absolutely. If you're thinking of becoming a Green supporter, that you're supporting more of the colonization and takeover of this country and turning it into one more aspect of the ever-growing caliphate. Last a bit now, though, ladies and gentlemen, something which is particularly even more so potentially dangerous than the de-prescription of Palestine action, right? He said that Zack Polanski backs legislation of all drugs, legalization of all drugs. All drugs, mind you. Apparently, the leader of the Green Party says he wants to legalize all drugs, according to the BBC, calling for an approach, quote, led by public health experts, not politicians. Speaking to the BBC South East ahead of his party conference, Zack Polanski said he agreed with a Kent Green councillor who earlier this year called for the legalisation of all drugs, including drugs like heroin and crack cocaine, the Class A stuff. Ladies and gentlemen, we can only assume then that he would legalise fentanyl, opioids maybe, and all of these other things. You can very easily see how damaging this is going to be. Ladies and gentlemen. I know some people like to make the case that, weed should be legal and all of these things, but you could very much so make the case that it is indeed a gateway drug. what's her name? Laura Ingraham, or Laura Ingraham. I'm not sure how to say it. Recently went on Fox News in the case that cannabis is the most dangerous drug in America right now. I'm going to play you that video in a moment. Because I think with the open border with the open border that Biden administration fostered, I think it's potentially fentanyl that's more dangerous at the moment. But in terms of being a gateway drug, cannabis is certainly something that does need to be talked about. And you can certainly see where areas have legalized it, they haven't exactly turned out as like utopias of like technological advancement and prosperity. It tends to just make you, lazy, apathetic, and really, really hungry. Give you a case of the munchies, right? Not exactly the thing to build the most productive and hardworking people, right? You can make the case for medicinal treatment if you want, right? But just going out and saying you're going to legalize all drugs. But this is a case where they want to focus on, quote unquote, like safe administration and like the things that the Biden administration were doing where, give them clean needles in vending machines and all of this stuff, which funny then you see how that actually contributes to the problem because he wants to enable these problems. You have to wonder why. What is he actually getting out of this? Said that the war on drugs has absolutely failed and ultimately we need to be having a public health approach. We asked about implications for this for the taxpayer. And he replied, well, I think voters are having to pay right now for a crime that happens. Funnily enough, we could stop the crime from happening if we actually adopted, a judicial system that works and keeping people in prison for the crimes that they commit, right? For violent crime, for theft, rape, and so on. Not letting child rapists roam the streets, right? And making taxpayers foot the bill for that. For the fact that people are in the illegal drug markets for gangs that we see across country lines. All of this is a failure of the fact, again, for far too long, prime ministers have stuck their heads in the sand and said, if we just make drugs illegal, everything's going to be okay. No, because you need strict punishment for people that break those laws, don't you? It's like you need strict punishment for people that commit murder, to stop people from committing murder, right? Somebody committed murder and you said, right, well, that's it. You're just going to be locked in a cell alone for the rest of your life and have your meals through a little hatch in the door. People's tunes would change a lot quicker, right? If prisons were day camps, for example. Look at the RICO cases against the mob in America. When they were given, Michael Franzi's been open about this, when they were given, the head honchos of the mafia, like 150 years in prison, when they were taking... Because then it allowed them to show that they were part of a bigger conspiracy. And as a result, they were able to bring different charges against them. They were able to charge them with racketeering and so on. As a result, even just the regular guy on the street that might just be doing a little bit of drug dealing or whatever, you could charge him with being part of this massive conspiracy. Next thing you know, under the RICO statute, he's then looking at 60, 50, however many years it is in prison, and he's got to do a minimum of about 85% of that time, right? There's no massive early release after like 10 years on good behavior or whatever. No serving like 20% of your sentence. But it was extremely effective. Many people might say it's too far, it's unethical, it should be illegal, whatever, but it was damn effective, right? I think it was William Blakey was the guy who came up with that legislation in America. It was extremely effective, right? Now you have the organized criminals in government that are the problem, which, you can make the case that a lot of them should be charged with RICO as well. But that extremely harsh and effective legislation and the long prison sentences that went along with it are what really brought down the mafia in New York. But really brought down the organized crime families. It wasn't legalizing their activities. It wasn't legalizing drugs. It wasn't legalizing gambling. It wasn't legalizing all of these different things, right? You can make arguments for those if you want, right, as Zack is doing. But it wasn't those who brought down the mafia. It was a effective law statute, right? It was an effective law and ruthless punishment on top of it. That's the approach that we should be taking, but we won't do it because we're soft. We're soft, and that's just the reality of it. But here's that video, ladies and gentlemen. Have listened to this. Let me know what you think. I certainly think that cannabis, you're Charlie Kirk talking about it, for example, it's a gateway drug and all of these things, and you look at other communities where they've legalized it and they haven't turned out, exactly great, right? I think there's a good case to be made for that. Whether it's the most dangerous drug in America right now, I'm not too sure about that, but obviously I live over here in the UK, so I can't necessarily talk about that. I think this will be an interesting perspective. I haven't watched this yet. Let's watch the video.
knowing what we know now about the link in a certain percentage of especially young men between weed use and violent psychosis and other mental illness, why would we encourage this at any level in our society?
We shouldn't. I consider cannabis to be the most dangerous drug in America right now, by the way, and I'm not trying to slight opioids here, but consider that SAMHSA, the Agency on Drug Abuse, which reported 7.6 million people going to ERs last year from drugs, puts now cannabis ahead of opioids, 12% cannabis, 11% opioids. And that's because of what you just said, because people have underlying mental health disorders and they don't even know it. They're suffering from anxiety, depression, maybe a small percentage schizophrenia. The first episode of psychosis that you have is accelerated, unfortunately, if you're a regular pot user or cannabis user. And again, the anxiety disorder can come out from excess cannabis use. And all of that is getting worse and worse. And then the gummies are sitting around and kids end up taking them. And over 20,000 calls to drug abuse hotlines last year, 80% kids. Why would anybody want that? Because they don't realize how bad this is. And cannabis also affects your heart. And cannabis also interrupts your sleep. And cannabis has not been proven to have absolute medical indication. So it's about education, and that's what we're doing here.
I want to bring back one thing you said. If that is true, that is horrendous. I just want to see if I can find it a moment. Where he said, wasn't it 80% of calls to cannabis hotlines were children? Oh, that's horrendous if that's true. Yeah, so he says 20,000 calls to drug abuse hotlines last year, and then 80% of them were kids because people are leaving gummies around and kids are taking them. That's truly horrendous if true. And that's why, again, blanket legalization and like putting them into gummies in this form where children get access to them. You have to put some kind of regulation in place if you're going to do this kind of stuff, I guess, because it's the same way that you would expect in the States where they have the ability to carry firearms and private gun ownership, right? That there are expectations that, especially if you have children, that you keep the gun under, lock and key, you keep it secured so that your kids can't access it, right? With very, very good reason. And you'd expect those legislations to be in place, I would imagine. Obviously, speaking as in a place where private gun ownership is a fucking fairy tale. I don't necessarily know. If any of my American friends who might be watching this want to fill me in, please do. But yeah, I would imagine this would have to be treated quite similarly to that. You can't just have cannabis gummies being left out where kids can take them. And then they're making up 80% of these referrals, 80% of these 20,000 referrals. That's 16,000 cases of kids getting referred to this hotline because they've ingested cannabis gummies. That's not okay. That's not okay. I'm just going to play this video for you one more time, ladies and gentlemen, just so you can really hear that and let us sink in. If you have anything to add on this, please do let me know. But again, when you're hearing that he wants to legalize not just fucking cannabis, ladies and gentlemen, all drugs, crack, cocaine, opioids, right? I suppose in some ways, opioids are kind of already legal on prescription. In some instances, you can get codeine, cocodamols and stuff like that. But again, just want to blanketly legalize all of these drugs. It's going to be disastrous, ladies and gentlemen.
All of that is getting worse and worse. And then the gummies are sitting around and kids end up taking them. And over 20,000 calls to drug abuse hotlines last year, 80% kids. Why would anybody want that? Because they don't realize how bad this is. And cannabis also.
Yeah, absolutely. If that's true, that's horrendous. And we should be taking that a lot more seriously. At least in America, they should be taking that a lot more seriously anyway. But that's why, again, you're hearing the leader of the Greens in this country, ladies and gentlemen, saying, yep, just legalize all of it. Just legalize all of it. I'm sorry, I'm trying to make some edits to my screen on the other side, and I realized I kind of messed it up then. But yeah, this is just, there's no words to just really describe how horrendous this is, how horrendous that would be. So if you're on the left and if you're dissatisfied with Labour, if you're dissatisfied with Plaid, please don't think that the Greens are going to be any better. please don't think that the Green's going to be any better. And that'll do it for today. That's been a bit of a longer episode today. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for watching, listening. Hope you have a fantastic morning, afternoon, evening, night, wherever you are. Take care. It's probably be out tomorrow, so Saturday the 4th of October now. Thank you all for your support. As always, again, please do check out the stuff in the members section or over on Locals, over on Patreon, etc. I got some interesting interviews coming up in the future, where if you're a part of those communities or if you're part of the Tier 2 membership on YouTube, you'll have your questions considered for the guests and so on, as well as the other benefits like early access to videos. And if you go to Tier 3 membership, you get exclusive videos and so on. I'm aiming to do one of those videos every month, because it keeps me reading books, it keeps me in the game of creating content, and it gives me more things to give back to you guys as well. Thank you very much. Have a great day, guys, and we'll see you again soon. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you for watching. Hwyl fawr. See you next time. You take care now. Godspeed.